See, so somebody was ahead. Okay, hi everyone. So I have the song, I don't have the graphic, but here we go. Let me share it. Share. Can you hear it? Okay,
No.
one moment. I'll stop share. Amy's gonna watch this and just laugh. Here we go.
Well, it's the end of the week.
Better?
Now where you been? Well,
Yeah.
You can hear it. Thank you. All right, everybody dance.
Come sit down and stare at your screen. We got a presenter that you never seen. We're Feedback Friday, we're on the loose. We'll be the train, you be the caboose. It's Feedback Friday with Kathy and Amy. Mashed potatoes and the gravy. It's Feedback Friday all day long. Feedback, feedback, Feedback Friday.
What are you doing? What was that?
That's our song. We have a theme song.
Okay.
Feedback. So everyone, if you could go ahead and mute, we'll get started. Welcome.
Oops. Cancel. Kathy.
I can't hear you, Kathy.
Okay. Kathy.
Oh, here we go. I was all muted and then I am now unmuted. How are you all doing? It's Feedback Friday, episode 35. And I just want to welcome you. Feedback Friday is our weekly show where we speak with artists, dyers, scholars, activists, growers, anybody who's in the natural dye and or color world is who we want to talk to. And so we've had some really amazing guests, which has been such a treat every week. I'm Kathy Hattori, president of Botanical Colors, and joining me today is Brees Honeycutt from Western Massachusetts. Amy Dufault, who's our director of social media and sustainability, hasn't been around the last few weeks or just occasionally. As you all know, her dad was extremely ill with leukemia and he passed away about a week ago. So today's his service and they're going to be laying him to rest. He's surrounded by love and I think they're having a military funeral for him. And so she'll be joining us next week and she says she'll have a great surprise for us. So that's where Amy is today, and we're wishing her the best and lots of love. I know it's a tough time. Today, our presenter is Debbie Bamford, who's joining us from North Wales. Debbie is actually a very accomplished historical dyer. So she has done research and practice on many of the ancient techniques of creating natural dyes. And so her business is the Mulberry Dyer. She both completed the certificate in City and Guilds Art and Design to create naturally dyed embroidery silks, but as of late, she's also become an associate of the, what is it?
Society of Dyers and Colorists.
Society of Dyers and Colorists. And so it's really a master dyer's designation that she's received. And she's one of the few natural dyers who has received this. So this is quite an accolade. So Deb is a specialist in madder root dyes. And so she actually has worked on and created turkey red from the ancient recipes. And for those of you who aren't familiar with turkey red, it's a very involved process that used to take days and dyeing, re-dyeing, remordanting, all sorts of chemical processes using the chemistry that they had of the day. So that included things like rancid oil and sheep dung. And the color is quite amazing. If you have a look at it, I have this old dye book about printing, and it looks like this. So it's much different than the madder oranges and browns and reds and peaches that we get on cotton. This is on cotton fabric. So Deb's going to be teaching a class on that we'll be announcing later on, and we hope you can join us. It's going to be quite involved and quite historical and quite amazing. Let's see what else. So, I mean, I just have to say that I've been so impressed. I saw Deb, I've known Deb for a long time, but I finally met her in person at a natural dye conference, and her work was just incredible. It's funny, we don't remember how difficult this was as a process. And when you see it in true life, or just check out her website, you'll just see some amazing colors. So before we turn it all over to Deb to get started, I just want to send out a huge thank you for everybody, for all of your support and interest. This keeps us going during these extremely difficult times. I know many of us are in places where we're basically back into lockdown, just in order to stay safe, but the vaccine is coming. So hopefully within the next few sessions, we'll be able to start to see some the light at the end of the tunnel. Brees is going to be our moderator, and she'll be monitoring the chat. And so we'll open up chat at the end of Deb's presentation so you can ask questions. And then at the end of the presentation, at the end of Feedback Friday, we'll unmute everybody and everyone can say hello and hang out for a few minutes. And this call is being recorded, and we will be giving you the recording probably early next week. You'll have access to it. So with that in mind, I have a few announcements afterwards, but Deb, it is all yours. Take it away, and welcome to Feedback Friday.
Thank you very much, Kathy. I'm just going to try and get this one to work first. Can I do that? Share. Are we seeing that, I wonder?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, excellent. That's a good start, isn't it? So, well, first of all, I should perhaps introduce myself a little more to quite a few people who will possibly never have heard of me. As Kathy says, I have been dyeing for a long time. I started the business back in the early 90s. The reason I started, and the reason I'm dressed like this really, my ex-husband and I split up, and I had 2 young children and I didn't know what to do with them. So I started taking them to reenactments. And because the boys were so young, I was asked to give myself a character, and I said, well, I'll become an embroideress then, because embroideresses could sit there and just do nothing, basically, but enjoy themselves. And so I went to college to do the embroidery course, the City and Guilds embroidery course, realised I couldn't find the embroidery threads that I needed to replicate the period threads, and decided to learn to spin and dye my own. So I went for spinning classes, and then I went on a 1-day course on dyes, and realised there actually isn't that much out there, or there wasn't then that much out there to give me any help. So I literally went back and started researching through all the old texts, started off in the 16th century, worked backwards from there. And now I basically call myself a medieval dyer. That's me. I'm a medieval dyer. Let's try moving on. So here's me at work. On the left-hand side, you can see I'm dyeing some cloth. My partner is in the other slide. He joined me in 2000. That's our tent. That's how we set up when we go to a living history event. And we've also got an embroidery frame there. I can pretend to be doing embroidery as well at the same time. I love what I do very much. I quite often call myself the most passionate natural dyer. and I have found it absolutely fascinating. But I have to say, that is what I am. I'm a dyer, I'm an artisan dyer, and I do not ever consider myself an artist. And I do think there is so much to learn and so much to know about natural dyes that actually a bit of embroidery is a bit of switch off, and that's it. So I put this slide up. I joined the Society of Dyers and Colourists, who are in the UK. However, they do cover all over the world. And they are people in the world that run an honours degree course in natural dyes, and it is called ASDC, Associate of the Society of Dyers and Colourists, and you can get it in natural dyes, and they are also chartered. So you can, the next stage for me is chartered colourist, so I can actually get an even higher recognition of the work that I do by becoming chartered. But if anybody's interested, I've put the link on the page. You can go and look at their things, and you can join. I think in America you've got some, we call it A squared, AATCC, and there are links between the two. But I think yours is more for colour fastness testing and things like that. And it is very much synthetic dye orientated. So we'll gloss over that bit because we don't ever mention those. So when I started getting asked to do some very strange commissions, but because I'm historical, one of the first things I was asked to do is the thing on the right, which is kind of a wall hanging that went up in a museum in York, and it was for their Fearsome Craftsman exhibition, and they wanted an example of the dyes of the medieval period and what happens if you over dye, so hence the weaving of the threads. On the left hand side you will see a Viking ship with a sail, and the sail is linen, and I dyed, it's weld and madder, and I did all the linen for that. What we've got here, but I also do modern dyeing as well, and I have been commissioned at one point to do some work on a carpet. A company in Yorkshire wanted to produce naturally dyed carpets because they were they had held the archive of one of the oldest carpet companies in Yorkshire, and some of the patterns would have only been dyed in natural dyes. So the project was set up to see whether the dyes would be comparable to the synthetic dyes that they think are wonderful, and whether they would be suitable for use in carpets. Now, the fact that we've got old carpets that are still dyed seemed to be a little bit of a challenge to their brains, but anyway, they went along with it. And the thing on the left shows that we had the dyes that it's madder in the dye bath, and you've got a report on the light fastness of the dyes that we did. So it was madder, logwood, fustic and pomegranate were the 4 dyes that were in the carpet. And as you can see, everyone exceeded grade 5, which means that they were higher than they needed to be. Grade 5 is the acceptable limit for carpets because of sunlight coming in through the windows. If you weren't doing clothes, then it's grade 3. So I think our natural dyes actually proved a point there. I think they were quite happy with that. I also, I was asked by Kathy to show you blacks. On the left here, you've got linen dyed with logwood black, and on the right, you've got wool dyed a medieval black. Black is something that is thought to be can be quite challenging, but actually it's something that's very, very interesting to produce, because it could have a blue tinge, or it could have a purple tinge, or it could have slightly yellow greeny tinge, depending on which of the colours dominated. So there's some samples, but the linen seems to love going black, I have to say. It gets a real intensity of colour, and the sheen stays, so, which is nice. I'm kind of rushing through this bit, and I don't want to. It's just that I know when I get to the medieval bit, I'll be more comfortable. The colours that you see on the screen at the moment are probably what I'm best known for. I replicate the colours of the Bayeux tapestry. So you've got the old colours, the repair colours, and how you see them. So you've got them as they would have been intensely and as they are now. So I just thought that shows you the sort of colours that we can produce as natural dyers in the Middle Ages. And then we get to turkey red. Commissions wise, I usually get an odd commission every year. By odd, I mean somebody who wants something different to something I've done before. And quite a while ago, I was asked by a charity called Fine Cell Work in London, who work with prisoners and do embroidery with them. They wanted turkey red, but they wanted turkey red producing without doing the turkey red process, because they wanted it in 3 weeks and, you know, kind of just do it. So I dyed a sample for them, which is the very pale one on the right hand side. And I said, no, we need to do the turkey red process. And they said, I don't know whether I've got time. And I said, well, if we don't do the turkey red process, we're not going to get turkey red. So they actually then decided that they would go ahead and we would produce the cloth in turkey red, which is the cloth on the left is obviously just coming out of the dye bath. And that's the finished piece. It was 6 meters of cloth dyed all in one in turkey red. And I did another piece at the same time. This one was done with castor oil soap. And I also did another piece with the emulsion oil, because there's 2 different methods historically for doing turkey red. Obviously into the Victorian period and towards the 20th century, then the process changed and we got turkey red oil. So that's that part. Then I started doing courses quite a while ago, and I was asked to do a course on turkey red. So the screen on the right actually shows you everything that my students did in a week. And the screen on the left shows you that you should never turn your back on your students, because before you know it, they'll start eating the madder. So they had quite a busy week that week, but they managed to do everything that was asked. I don't know whether it was by actually being given the madder to eat or not. I also work with indigo and with modern dyes, extract dyes, which is actually how I first met Kathy, because Kathy was my contact when I wanted to buy extract dyes right at the very start. And so when I'm running a course, I will quite often do it as a back to the future type thing. So we'll do some work in the morning where we're working with the old style dyes and the old style pans, and we'll do some work in the afternoon where we're doing modern dyes and playing around. So that's another type of course. And just at the end of this bit, I thought, well, I better show you I can do something other than dyeing. So these are some naturally dyed braids that I made for a medieval knight who was going to spend the night on his knees before being knighted the next day. So a bit unusual. So that's that one. Now, I think we're on to, I can be me. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Mistress Deborah, the dyer, and I am dressed in clothing from the 1470s in England. So Wars of the Roses period, if you know that period of history. And so the king on the throne is Edward IV, and he's about to have problems with the Lancastrians. And actually, I should be a Lancastrian because I was born in Lancashire. So during the Middle Ages, dyers had quite a good status. So I'm reasonably well dressed, although I'm in my working clothes with my headgear. We'll get onto that in a moment. They had guilds in the various towns that would control what the dyers were producing. So we still have in London the Worshipful Company of Dyers. This is their crest and coat of arms. And they are quite significant because they still hold the right, along with the Queen and the Vintners Company, to look after the swans on the River Thames. And there's only those three people that are allowed to care for the swans. So it's quite a prestigious guild, to say the least. And the same applied in all the various towns. And towns in England would be licensed to produce various colours. And if you lived in England, you would know that if I said Lincoln is licensed to produce a green, and Robin Hood was supposed to be famous for wearing Lincoln green. Coventry is famous for wearing blue, and their football team represent that colour by wearing a blue kit. York was actually famous for producing scarlet, and scarlet was a type of cloth rather than a colour, but it became known to be the colour because of the dye that was used on it. And the dye is kermes. So this is kermes that I obtained a while ago. And I decided to do a sample dye. And kermes, you use 100% dye, basically. And if you use cochineal, you only use 10 to 20% maybe. And so for the same amount of cloth, the kermes, as you can see on the right, is very pale compared to a cochineal. So you can see why kermes effectively got wiped out when we discovered cochineal. But it's still fascinating to see the actual little, they look like peppercorns. They were always known as grain, and I can see why. They do look like little peppercorns if you look at them up close. Right, clothing. I haven't actually put this one on. This is a hennin. Should be here somewhere. Should I wrote it in there? Yeah, here we go. Can you see this? This is my hennin. This is what I'd wear if I was going out somewhere nice. And so this is the in-betweeny one. You know, normally you see the medieval people with the big, tall hats. I've got one that's kind of about here. And when I've got it on, it's very nice to wear. It is, the colours are very faded looking, but they're not as faded as that. It was dyed in weld, and then it was dyed in weld and woad to get the green. This is the liripipe that you can see around my neck. Now, this is my favourite item of clothing. I was telling Cathy and Brace earlier on, because I think we should bring them back. I think we should wear them now. You've got a collar here, and then you've got a hood, and then you've got a scarf that goes around your neck, and it all holds on very nicely when it's really horrible weather. The significance of this particular hood to me is a friend made it for me because she found this piece of wool cloth here, and it was labelled made in Prato. And in Prato in the Middle Ages, in the late 1300s, early 1400s, there was a merchant called Francesco de Marco de Tini, and he was a huge merchant. I mean, he traded all over Europe. He had places in London, Mallorca, Barcelona, Avignon. And he was just trading with everybody all the time. And he had a dye house run by a Niccolo, I can't remember his surname, Niccolo. But he's famous because he kept all his documents. There's 150,000 documents held in an archive in Prague, and some of them are naturally dyed. So the 4 pieces of cloth on the left on one graph were dyed in 1402, and the 2 on the right were dyed in 1398. Look at the intensity of the colour and tell me they couldn't dye nicely in the medieval period. I think it's absolutely astounding, the depth of colour that they've got there. And those are samples that were sent to Mr. Dettini to ask for that colour to be matched. And they were able to do colour matching to that extent. Another interesting point about these photos is that the actual selvage is showing the other colour. It's showing what was over-dyed on what. And so you've got, particularly with the green, the yellow went on first, and then the blue went over the top, because the selvage has been kept to show the yellow. So I think the whole thing is absolutely fascinating. If we start delving back, there is so much information to tell us how to dye with natural dyes. So now we go on to my gown, which is what I'm wearing here. And I think you'll probably see from the photograph something fairly significant. I made a mess. It's dyed in madder, obviously, but the edges of the cloth stayed very pale and the centre of the cloth went very dark. And so I have this huge stripe going down the middle. Now, it was kind of practice for the dyers to obviously use reject cloths, but that would be classed as really badly dyed. And I think we need to know that the ability to dye level is also very significant. That would have been taken away. They had I don't know how they did it in European countries, but certainly in Britain, we had people called the all-nagers who would come to the dye house and they would check that the piece of cloth was the right size, that it was well dyed, that you dyed whichever colour properly. So they'd look to see what the selvage colour was, to see that you'd done the right colour first. And when they were happy, they would put a seal on it. And if they weren't happy, you didn't get to do anything with it. They took it away. It was confiscated. You lost that money. It was gone. So it was then probably sold on by the all-nagers, but you didn't get the money for it. So you had to do a good job. As a woman, you'd think I wouldn't be able to be a dyer, but actually I would. If my husband or my father had been a dyer, I would have spent my life learning how to be a dyer. I would have then gone on and married probably into the dyeing fraternity. And if my husband died, I would be able to carry on the dye house until I died. So I would have been allowed to join the guild, but I wouldn't have been allowed to do it directly. In London, there were braiders. They were known as the Soper Lane Silk Women, and they, in their inventories and their wills, have left their dye pots to other ladies, and they were a very significant group of women who were dyeing. But in the main, certainly the guild records show that it was men, but women could take the name. So moved on in photos to my kirtle, which is underneath my gown. I can't see really, but you wear it underneath, and that's what I'd wear when I was working. This was dyed 25 years ago. It's the first item of clothing that I actually dyed, and it is a linen, and it was dyed in madder and turmeric. And you can see which bits I wear and which bits I don't, because the sleeves are always tucked down my back rather than on my arms for me to be able to work. and the sleeves are still showing some colour. If I actually turn them inside, I should turn one inside out, and you can see it's even more intense. But you can also see the way the kirtle folds over, how it's all faded as well. But that is worn very regularly through the summer, in sun, rain, whatever weather. So I think it's reached the end of its life, really. But as with all things, we would have carried on, amended or cut down or made something else out of it. So that wouldn't be a reject totally. And of course it could always go back in the dye bath, couldn't it? So that's just a nice image of coloured wool. And some of the publications I haven't written a book. If I ever write a book, it'll be a textbook that nobody wants to read. But I do like putting articles together occasionally. And I have done some television work in the UK. We have, I don't know if you've heard of them, but there's a series of programmes that have been done by Ruth Goodman and Peter, what can't I think of his name? Anyway, there was the Victorian Farm and Tales from the Green Valley and Edwardian Farm and Tudor Monastery Farm. And I did the Victorian Farm Christmas special. But one that I know did go out to America and that you can still get on YouTube is a programme called A Stitch in Time, where they were looking at paintings from history and how the costume was made. And I was asked to how to use the green in the Arnolfini portrait. So I just thought I'd mention those at the end. Okay, and that's my details. And if you want to, Kathy, would you like to open it up for questions now? It's very strange to normally get questions thrown at me whilst I'm talking.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. That Arnolfini thing. I'm going to have to ask you about that. But let's see. Breeze, is chat open?
It is open now, yes.
Chat is open, folks. If you have questions, please put them in chat. Deb, thank you so much for this incredible talk and the work that you've done. So while we're waiting for questions to show up in chat, so the Arnolfini, that's that picture of the couple that is being wedded or has been wed. Is she expecting, or is it just her posture?
No, it's not. It's there's so much cloth in the gown that when they, because normally you tuck the gown up at the front, so she's holding it up and it makes her look as though she's pregnant.
Okay.
But it's
okay. So
it's
then,
the volume of cloth that's there.
Tell me about that green then.
Well, we did weld and wode, obviously.
Yeah.
And it worked very well, actually. The film crew were stood there and they went, "Oh, you've got the green."
Right.
And I said, "Well, wasn't that what you wanted me to do?" And they went, "Well, yeah, I suppose it was, really."
Were you, did you do the indigo first or the wode first, or did you do it as a top?
We did the weld first and then the wode.
Wow. Okay.
So,
fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't do the weld first because going into the wode will strip the colour. But I've not noticed any great problem with that. And if you look at the sample that I showed you from 1402, that was very clearly weld dyed first, because the selvage is dyed in the weld and the wode is only from the rest of the cloth.
Right.
So.
Okay. Reese, let's go ahead and take some questions.
Certainly. So we have, well, many people want you to write a book, so think about that. But also we have questions about the turkey red process. Could you talk a little bit more about those, 35, 40 steps that go into it?
And Deb, before you do that, you can unshare your screen so we can see you in your full glory here.
I did that straight away. Okay, stop share.
There we go.
Okay. Actually, I could close that one down, which would take away
the
confusion.
You're good. You're good.
Yeah, there we go. Right. Hello, I'm here. Okay, so turkey red. Yes, fascinating. There are various methods or books that content of dyeing turkey red. All of them pretty much agree, really, that the oiling is the most significant part. But we also add sheep poo, and we have the oil, emulsion oil. Rancid olive oil is the primary way of doing it, the oldest way of doing it. But you can also do it with castor oil soap. And that oiling is so significant, because if you don't get that part right, when you actually get to the dyeing, which is quite a few stages later, but when you get to the dyeing and you go into the madder bath, if you haven't done the oiling correctly, the madder won't work. And you actually get it rubbing off fingernails. It kind of goes into your cuticle and your fingernails if it's not worked properly. So it's poo, oiling, you do a rinse, then it's tannin mordant, then alum mordant twice, then calcium carbonate, and then you go into the madder. And then after you've done the madder, you brighten it. So it's a very, very complex process, and it will take not days, but weeks. Trying to do it in a week is quite entertaining. So I have got a lot of preparation to be going on with. So.
Okay. And
yeah.
so people want to know a little bit more about the turkey red process. So I was doing a little homework. Obviously, I don't know everything that you know, but it was a process. It's an age-old process, and then it happened when cotton came in, and it was used to dye cotton mainly.
It's only really for cotton. It started out in India, and cotton is more prevalent in India, and then it moved over to Turkey, which is why it's known as turkey red. It was done primarily in Adrianople in Turkey, and then, which is now called Edirne. How you pronounce it, I'm sorry, I have no idea how you pronounce it in Turkish, but Edirne is how it's spelt. And then some Greeks got hold of the method, and they came over to France, to Rouen, and they taught the French how to do it, because by the late 1700s, cotton chintzes had become incredibly popular in Europe, and everybody was wearing these lovely, lovely cotton chintzy materials with the patterns and the colours on. And so they wanted to know how to get a really good red on this cotton. And then two gentlemen from Rouen went to Manchester to ask to start a dye works there doing turkey red. And another guy called Papillon also came to Manchester and said, can I do it here? And Manchester said, oh, well, we've already got the Burrells doing it. So Papillon went up to Glasgow and started the works up in Glasgow. And that became the Turkey Red Company. And it was a massive, massive industry for that particular area of the Vale of Leven in Scotland. But it is cotton principally, because you can't get a decent red with madder without the process.
So that is one question that people have, that so in order to get that amazing turkey red, you have to do all those steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the significant things about it, I should have said this when I was talking about the commission. When I sent the cloth off to the embroiderers, the fine cell work, they actually said they couldn't use it in the end, because by the end of the process, the fibres had taken on so much of the oil and everything else, and the madder. Even it is very, very well fixed, and I'll tell you the test in a minute. But it had taken it on, and the threads had swelled so much that they actually couldn't get the embroidery needles. It had gone like a really thick canvas.
No kidding.
So the process is actually getting right into the center of the fibers. The other thing is, if you do a nitric acid test, which I don't recommend people do just at home, but there is a nitric acid test, and with turkey red, you can drop some nitric acid onto a piece of cloth that's dyed turkey red, and the colour will last before it's taken away. So you know that you've got a really good dye if you do that test.
And Deb, someone wants to know why turkey red wasn't done on wool or silk and only on cotton.
Well, you wouldn't need to do it on wool because you can get good reds on wool anyway. But I think the process would actually destroy the wool by the time you've finished. It would just have felted, wouldn't it? You can do it on linen. I suppose there's not really any reason not to do it on linen or hemp, but it was specifically for the cotton industry.
And it was light fast too, right? And it's extremely light fast.
Oh,
turkey
yes,
red.
Yeah. It's the best dye that you can get. It is really significant from that point of view. Not that the synthetic dyers accept that. Say, oh no, the synthetic dyers are much better.
So we'll step away from turkey red for a minute and let's talk about the hat or I forgot what you call it that you have on. People want to know where can you get a pattern and how to make them.
You have in America, there is a company called Historic Enterprises who do all sorts of medieval costume. Whether they actually do patterns or not, I don't know. The historical market that I was involved in organising, if you go on to the original reenactors market, there are various traders within the market who do patterns for the various items of clothing, so a lira pipe or a hennin or whatever. And you can also find people who make them for you as well, of course, if you don't want to make it yourself. So it's www.reenactorsmarket.co.uk if you want to have a look at that, and that will take you out to the various traders, and Historic Enterprises are on there as well.
And can you tell, how do you spell it? Is it a lira pipe? Is that what you called it?
Lira pipe, Liripipe, lira pipe.
I know Amy's going to ask for that, so I want to make sure I have that written down for her. Someone wants to know, how do you keep the selvage color when it's over dyed in the second color? When you showed that lovely image.
Ooh, that's a good one. Whether you basically you keep that selvage out. You dip as far as the selvage and use the selvage as a holding point. Does that make sense? Yes. So they used to be able to drop the cloth in. If they were doing it on the roller, it was harder, but if you stitch the two pieces and fell the seam, that will hold the selvage as well. Do you know what felling is? You know, where you fold it over, so it's you put the two edges together and then you fold them over so that one's completely enclosed. It's a bit like shibori type thing where you've stitched it over so tightly that the colour can't penetrate effectively.
Thank you. Someone also wants to know, can you still buy kermes and can you grow it? I don't know.
Can you grow it? Well, the little insects.
Right.
There is a lady called Dominique Cardon who people may have heard of. And she actually has Kermes oak in her garden, and she has tried to cultivate the Kermes beetle. She did a little. I don't know whether they're still there, but I think they keep not surviving on her. You can still get Kermes. It is very difficult. There's a company in Germany called Kramer Pigment who sell a little Kermes, but it's very hard to actually get, to actually have enough to do a dye bath. It would be very expensive. I think it's something like 20-30 pounds for just a gram of Kermes, something like that, to buy it.
It's 53 USD for a gram.
Okay, there you go. I know it's expensive.
It's like what, 20 little pieces of Kermes, is it? 50?
Yeah, for a gram.
Not a whole lot.
So here's an interesting question. If certain guilds were only allowed to dye specific colors, did it mean there were no multicolored or patterned fabrics allowed? Or
No, they were licensed because they had the right water to produce a really good version of that colour, but it didn't stop other colours being produced. And obviously, well, patterns, tartans, stripes, that sort of thing went by areas. The Welsh were famous for their stripes, and the Scots were famous for their tartans even earlier than we think they were, and broad stripes. That was yarn dyeing though, rather than cloth dyeing. So that would be woven afterwards.
so
It was piece dyeing that they were licensed to produce the colours for.
We have a lot of questions back to turkey red, and people want to know the sequence of the steps. So is that on your website? Could they find?
It's not on my website at the moment because that's part of the fun of coming on the course.
That's right, of course, exactly.
But it is literally what I just said. It's the sheep poo, then the oiling, then the tanning, then the alum, then the rinsing, effectively the cleaning, then the madder, and then the brightening. That is the sequence. And you can do the sheep poo at the same time as the oiling. You can mix it all in together, but I like to do it first and get that kind of out the way. The sheep enjoy it when I'm wandering around with a bucket. I go around with a bucket to pick up the sheep droppings, and well, my sheep used to just walk around because he thought I'd got food for him. When I showed him, he wasn't impressed.
And someone wants to know, is the brightening done with tin?
No, it's just literally steaming it.
Let's see.
You can do tin, but it's not the way it's done.
So people are asking about workshops, and I know, Kathy, you mentioned that you're going to be doing a turkey red botanical colors with Deb, right?
Yeah.
And so people can stay tuned for that to learn.
Let me just jump in, Brees. Yeah,
okay.
So we're going to be having a 5-day class with doing turkey red. And so the way that we can do this in 5 days instead of, what is it, a month or something, however long it takes, is that Deb is actually preparing all the different steps. So each person will get a package that has specific steps for specific days. And it's the length of time, because there's periods where you're going to be putting some substance on or dyeing it, and then having to either re-dye it or let it. Do you have to smoke anything or stove anything?
No, you don't have to smoke it.
Okay, good.
No, but you have to, going into the oil, you have to do that 6 times, and you have to let it air in between.
Right.
In between times, so that takes the time.
Right.
So you get a piece of material that you can take all the way through, because you're going to do each stage. But effectively, so you can move on to the next stage and know how to do the next stage straight away, and you'll get obviously proper instructions on how to do each stage and everything.
So once you've done it, right?
Yeah.
Once you've done it, you'll also have the ability to redo it, to replicate it.
That's right.
But yeah, it takes a while. That'll be at the end of February. I believe it's February 24th.
24th, was it? Yeah.
Like 27th, is that right?
24th, I think you said.
through the
I
28th.
can't remember.
We can't
Yeah.
either, but I put it in the email we sent around, and then we'll be opening that class fairly soon. We're just getting all the details together. But that should be really interesting, and hope you can join us for that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. Deb, someone wants, or a couple people have referenced Jem Lyle's book. And have you ever used, he wrote the book called The Art and Craft of Natural Dyeing. Have you ever used?
He did, yeah. I have used Jim Lyle's, but I would say that his book is probably one of the most significant of the modern dye books it's like a little Bible in my, and I use that book quite a lot, but you have to read it very carefully. I don't know if people have registered quite how thoroughly you book, but his book covers everything. So yes, and sadly, I never met him. I would have loved to have met him, but I know several people who did know him, and I was at one stage hoping to get a sample of his turkey red dyeing from his wife, but unfortunately it never materialized. But yes, he was very significant as far as I'm concerned.
And
if there's only one dye book you need to buy, that's the one to get.
You just time traveled to some asteroid. So
right.
Quiet.
Try that again. Could you say that last sentence again, Deb? Oh, I think we.
Yeah, I said his book. I would say. Oh, am I going funny?
You are.
You are going a little funny.
Yeah.
Ooh,
are you and people want to know about your tapestry work, the restorations of tapestries and the dyes that you the wool that you dyed.
I don't do restoration of tapestries. I produce naturally dyed yarns for people who do historical work. I have commissions from the V&A, and I've had them ask me to replicate things, but I don't tend to do any restoration myself. I will do embroidery work. Ital Castle wanted some flags for the Flodden Fields exhibition they were doing, so I did the flags for that. In general, I'm a dyer rather than anything else.
And a beautiful dyer at that. You are an artist. We had this conversation in the beginning, like what it makes an artist, and you are an artist. Dyers are artists. Let's see. And so people want to back to the oil. Why do you use castor oil, or rancid olive oil, or whatever it might be for the turkey red process?
Well, you're breaking the oil down into its constituent chemicals effectively, and that helps them penetrate and bond with the fibres of the cotton, so that it actually really bonds in rather than just sitting on the surface or doing other bonding. It's a proper chemical bond, not a mechanical bond. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And so what is the blue scale?
The blue scale, oh, right. The blue scale is what they use in light fastness. It's a standard that everybody who is doing light fastness testing should use. And you buy cards that have got, can't remember how many blues it has on it, but you put your samples next to the blue samples, put them, well, when you send it away for light fastness testing, they obviously put them into a box with a light. If you put it into a south-facing window with the blue scale next to it, it tells you, the numbers go by how quickly the blue fades next to yours. So if yours fades at the same rate as the first one, then it's the second one, it's a bit better, and if it's the third one, it's a bit better, and so forth. So each of those blues are a standard that have been achieved, that they know will always fade in this way.
That makes sense. And one other question about madder. Do you prefer ground madder or the root, or a powdered madder, or the root of the root itself?
I'm actually doing some experiments at the moment. I've got some fresh madder, which I am drying, but I am also peeling, chopping, grinding, doing everything with, and doing various samples. I haven't put anything up on my blog about it yet, but I will. But I've been working so hard on that, I've actually stopped writing the blog up. But I did some fresh, and I'm doing some dried, and all sorts of different stages of which bit of the madder gives me the most colour and all this sort of thing, because it just absolutely fascinates me, madder. So far, I have worked with chopped madder that you get from dye suppliers, or whole madder roots. I managed to get some whole madder roots, I think, from Kathy and a while ago at Earth Hues. And I think that if I can chop it myself or grind it myself, then I know what I've got. So I quite often will do the soaking and the grinding, which is part of the turkey red process as well, with the madder to grind it down. And that comes from Lyle's. He recommends that you do that. Soak it and then chop it and grind it, and then do it again and again and again.
I put some of mine in a blender. Is that really bad to do?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Well, Deb, thank you so much. I know that it's almost that time, and this was amazing. A history walk and a dye lesson in both. That's quite something. So Kathy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Deb, thanks again. That was so inspiring to know that today we can learn how to make some of these amazing colors that have been around since medieval times. That's always so fascinating to me to realize that there are so many other lives, cultures, practices to build beautiful color. That was really wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, one day I'd like to go to America.
Oh, you are welcome
colours as well.
anytime. Get your shot and come on over.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Kathy, for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. Of course. I'm just going to talk a few reminders and then tell you about next week's guest. See, Sasha Durr is teaching a class on January 9th and 10th on basically foraging and finding different colors that are in your backyard. It's called, I don't even remember what it's called, but it's a plant color. And Sasha is so wonderful and accommodating to like